How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. It says on the screen, it says your name is Davi Nakano.
Yeah.
Some big boots to fill.
What's that, sorry?
No, I just said that's some big boots to fill, Davi Nakano.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay.
So should we start?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, I need to record, right?
Yep.
I need to start recording.
I can start the recording here.
Okay. Quer que faça a transcrição? You want to subscribe it? There is a box here. Well, let's see what happens.
Miko, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
All good.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are starting the session for the citation of thesis, master thesis presentation of Ely Lima. So thank you, Tarek. Thank you, Nico, for your willingness to participate, your participation here. So this is a formal and public presentation. So we are here in this room, Tarek, but we should keep the door open. So if anyone wants to participate, it's welcome to do so. Let's say the schedule is very simple. Ely has 20 minutes for presentation. Then we go to the questioning or the comments from you. And I think you both are from, because usually let's say, the tradition is we start with the whoever is farthest. So you are both from the UK, but since Nico's here,
Then we start with Tarek.
okay, so we start with Tarek and then Nico, and then I have some, I can conclude that. And so this ends the questioning part of the session. And then we have a closed part where Ely will leave us and we'll discuss our assessment of his work. And then we open again, and Ely takes part again for to finish the session. Okay, so this is basically the schedule for today's session. Okay, so it's okay. I would ask you to Ely start its presentation.
Okay, should I start? Can I start?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Ely Lima, and today I'm here to share with you the research work I have done with the constant and close help of Professor Davi. I also want to thank the contributions and presence of Professor Miko and Professor Tarek. It's a pleasure and honor to have you as member of this committee. The thesis title is Insights on Creative Hub Management, from Working Together to Activity Impact. The presentation starts with a brief introduction, followed by a literature review. Then we have the method, the results, the discussion, conclusions, and limitations, pretty similar to the document, the thesis document. The research objective is to understand from an insight perspective, in considering the heterogeneity of spaces and proposals, what are the challenges, the different aspects and elements limiting creative hubs reaching their goals. Thus, from this more profound view, the research understands it's possible to better explain, understand, assess, and develop the creative hubs. From this research objective, 3 research questions they were developed. The first one, it's about the challenges and difficulties experienced by the host or the creative hub management in the Global South. The second question is about how the host they can assess and evaluate the hub's performance. And the third question is about how internal and external elements, such as the COVID-19, they can modify and alter the hub's dynamics. Looking at the creative hub phenomenon, 4 factors they were identified as a research gap. The first one is the growth of creative hub initiatives. Through all the world, it's possible to see different initiatives increasing in the last decades of creative hubs. With this increasing, of course, there is a diversification of models and the structures as well. Then, by diversification, we understand it's possible to see initiatives that will vary in industry focus, in services offered, in location. This is the second factor. The third factor is, despite the recognition of the host importance, it's still lacking research and more profound analysis on the role. And the fourth factor, and the last one, is how the impacts of creative hubs, they are not clear. There is a debate over the real impacts of creative hubs. So these 4 factors here, they compound why this research, why this study is important. And before we jump into the method section, here we have the creative hub concept definition. There is most of the definitions in the literature, they are convergent regarding the definition, the structure, the scope of the creative hub concept. So here we have 2 examples. The first one is from the London Development Agency. It was that was made 20 years ago, and the second one is from the British Council. It's a more recent one, but both of them they agree. They are saying similar things about the creative hub concept. So they have a similar definition of the concept. And here we're using the creative hub as an umbrella concept. In the method section, we will explain what are the techniques, what are the approaches that have been used to answer the research questions. So first, this systematic literature review and a bibliometric analysis were performed. Both of them, they have used Web of Science and Scopus as sources. These 2 sources, they are the largest peer-reviewed sources, and they contain the publications of the leading journals with impact factors. And to perform the bibliometric analysis, a bibliometric software was used with the help of Excel for the data preparation. Here we have how the sampling process has gone. That was performed using strings as Creative Hub, Innovation Hub, and the first search was executed in January of 2022, and it resulted 1,184 publications. After applying several filters as only articles and reviews, quality filters, publications, the initial sample for the bibliometric analysis execution is compounded by 461 articles. And with the bibliometric analysis, it was possible to identify the 40 most relevant articles to compound here the research. Here we have 2 examples of how the bibliometric analysis look like. The first example is a call citation network, and in the red cluster, we can have what's the authors that may be the most relevant for the research field, and also shows other authors that are important for the concept understanding. And in the second figure, we have the most cited publications. And then 20 of the most cited publications, they're part of the 40 most relevant publications. So only to show how the bibliometric analysis help us to identify the most relevant publications. And a supplemental literature was also performed to enrich the bibliography and to expand the understanding of the host role. This new search has used specific terms related to the host, and it was realized in November 16 of 2022, using also Scopus in the Web of Science. Some takeaways from these 22 articles are they describe several functions performed by the host. This literature, these 22 articles, they also they have similar aspects regarding the benefits of the host, the benefits of the host, the relevance of the host definition, the host functions. Other takeaway is that only 6 articles, not only from the 22, but from the 62 articles, they are directly or partially related to the host role. I mean that only 6 of them have their research question related to the host. And despite the convergence of literature and the recognized importance of the host, the literature is still not approaching the challenges the host they face in creative hubs. So here we have some takeaways, and here an example of the analysis that was performed with the 22 articles. So the research has tried to organize the different definitions, functions, benefits of the host according to the 22 publications, and this step was essential to gain perspective on the host role, the literature, and to establish a knowledge foundation for the interview execution and for the results interpretation. And commenting on the interviews execution, here we have the data collection. The data collection has counted with the participation of 13 creative hubs. The host of each one of these hubs, they were interviewed, and also secondary data was collected. These 13 creative hubs, they are distributed in the São Paulo city's boundaries. And most of them are located in a more urban region, although we have some of them that are in peripheral areas of São Paulo. These creative hubs, they were selected according to their availability to be part of this study, and also the diversity they could add to the research. The interviews, they were executed during the lockdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, it may have affected the participation and engagement of a greater number of creative hubs. And here we have the profiling work that has been done with the 13 creative hubs. We try to organize the interview data, and also the hub offers, according to unit features from the creative hub kit, the basic characteristics of each one of the hubs, and also the roles these hubs they may play according to the hub host. Okay. And here we have the order 13. And then the data analysis using an inductive approach with an open coding technique that involves the selection, the categorization, and labeling of direct statements. And from the empirical data, we start a process of getting the data and transforming in first order concepts. So from the 30 interviews, we selected 194 host quotes, and then they were grouped in 121 first order concepts. And then through a process of understanding the researcher, understanding the literature, and comparing with the first order concepts, 47 order concepts, second order concepts, they were generated from the 121. And then only 20 were selected because only these 20 second-order concepts, they are associated or directly related to the host role. And then from the 20, and to really have the most relevant, the ones that could be generalized for other creative hubs, we selected only 9 of the 20. I'm going to explain in the next slides how that happened. And then these 9 second-order concepts, they were then derived in practical propositions according what hubs should do, what hubs should not do, what hubs should have, and what hubs should avoid. So what the research has done here is to, from the empirical data, we start doing some theoretical building, and then how from theory, how from a concept, we can have some practical propositions, some practical actions for researchers and for community of practice as well. And then here we have the 20 second-order concepts and the hubs back in the concepts. From the quotes from the first-order concepts, we can have the number of hubs backing, and the research has defined a threshold of at least 3 hubs backing, so we could generalize the second-order concepts in a better way. So here we have 9 second-order concepts that have more than 3 hubs backing them, and here we have the 9 second-order concepts. And here we have the exercise that has been done with the 4 dimensions of what hubs should do, what hubs should not do, and so on, and the practical propositions. So we understand this table helps not only researchers, but sponsors and hosts and people involved, people that wants to understand the creative hub phenomenon. It's a good way to assess, to develop, and to understand the creative hub in not only the concept, but in practical actions. And then from discussion of results and reflection of theoretical reflection, the research has reinforced some of the current literature propositions and reviews new emerging discoveries as well. So here we have organized the 7 topics with the results of the study of the research, and not only these 7 topics they reinforce with empirical data, but they also can expand the generalization degree of the current literature proposition to the global South context. Okay, as we have a short time, I couldn't go through all the topics, but to exemplify how the research reinforces, we have the creative city and community engagement topic. Some of the hosts and some of the creative hubs participating in the research, they have commented, they have mentioned that it was pretty important, and they understand, they have as a goal, as an objective, to make an impact in the society surrounding the creative hub. That's something important, and can see that the creative hub can really help to develop the community surrounding these hubs, and it reinforces the creative city theory of how the creative hub can help to economic develop a specific district or city. And also regarding the new emerging discoveries, the research describes some of the COVID-19 impacts and some of the external factors that can alter and modify the hub's dynamics. And as a discussion, so from all the data that was collected from the different second-order concepts and from the results interpretation, the research has developed a new framework that's called a hubs relationship model. It also helps to answer the question 1 and 2 of the research. And then this model is agnostic, so regardless the creative hub industry focus, regardless the services offered, we understand a creative hub dynamic can be explained by this model. So here we have the 5 participants, the Creative Hub itself, creative workers, sponsors, government, and clients. They participate and engage with Creative Hubs in a different form. And here we emphasize the Creative Hub primary or elemental attribution of intermediating relationships, intermediating creative workers and clients and sponsors, and also each one of them may have different expectations and objectives. And then we highlight the host role because the management activities is performed by the host, and also the how to deal with the different expectations and objectives, how to manage the infrastructure, the services offered. All of this is performed by the host role. And then from the interaction of the new framework, the hub relationship model, with the data that we have collected, was possible. The research has identified 4 main insights. The first insight is about the misalignment of goals and objectives that some of the parties participating in the Creative Hub they may have. And so this is the first insight, and the current literature for sure to highlight this condition. The second insight is about the unbalanced relationship between the different participants and the asymmetry of influence. That's something that we couldn't find in the literature as well. So we understand this is the second insight here. And the third insight is about the curatorship. Most of the literature approaches the curatorship regarding only the selection of participants, the selection of people and engagement with the Creative Hub. But here we understand it's important to have the curatorship process for also the services offered by the architecture of the space and by other aspects rather than the people involved in the Creative Hub. And the fourth factor, it's about the host importance again, because to manage to deal with the misalignment of goals and objectives, to deal with the unbalanced relationship, the symmetry of influence, all these challenges, all these aspects that can be challenges for the Creative Hub, the house role, the house sphere, they can help to manage this and to reduce the impact these different insights can have in Creative Hub dynamic. And then also through the interaction of the data, of the models, was possible to, the research has proposed a new taxonomy that's based on the second insight. So here the taxonomy is based on the influence degree. So the different types, we have developed 5 types, but we understand it's possible to have more than 5 types. And here, each type is based on some of the participants' influence degree. So in the type A, the creative workers, they are the highest influential participant in the Creative Hub dynamic. Then the services offered by the Creative Hub, they may be more suitable for the creative workers. The objectives, the results, assessment, and so on. So all the Creative Hub structure, they will be more modified by the creative worker requirements and needs. And the type E is the same logic, but having the sponsor as the highest influential participant, and so on for the other 5 types. And then as a conclusion and limitation, the practical contributions are the identification of the different challenges and the relevance of the host, the models, the taxonomy in the results topics, they also perform a practical contribution, and also the practical propositions, they can help the community of practice to assess, to develop, and to better understand the Creative Hubs. And as practical contributions, we have the external events as the COVID-19 and also the remote and hybrid work. So the research identifies some effects and some of the ways that the 13 creative hubs they have used to overcome the problems generated for the COVID-19 and the hybrid and remote work. As the theoretical contribution, you have the literature consolidation. So through the systematic literature review and through the bibliometric analysis, the most relevant authors, the most relevant publications, the literature gaps and opportunities of development, they were all assessed. And here the new framework, the relationship model, the new taxonomy can also help to expand the current understanding of creative hubs. And also some of the concepts of the current literature, they were reinforced. As limitation and recommendation, the applied methodology and the author bias are some of the limitations. Also, the research could use more non-academic literature. And as recommendation, more confirmatory studies, using more empirical data, using greater diversity of creative hubs in different locations of the global south as well. So these are the conclusions and limitations of this study. And thank you very much. And here we have the space for questions. Please feel free to bring on your comments and questions.
Thank you, Ely. Just 20 minutes. So, Tarek, would you like to start?
Yeah, Ely, thanks for that. It was really insightful. You know, I can see the amount of work there that you've done there. So it was really, really great. I really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed reading the paper before that. So good work here. Okay, but yeah. So I've just got a few questions. Okay, and this is not a critique in any way, shape, or form. These are just questions. Okay. You start off the thesis with the notion of the global south, right?
Yep.
So in the thesis itself, it feels like there isn't really, and I guess there's a bit of a critique about the fact that, you know, a lot of the work that has been done is more oriented towards the global north than it is the global south, right? And I just wonder whether, what do you mean by the global south? Because I guess the question for me is, Brazil is, I guess it could be seen as a developing country, but in many ways it's not a developing country. There are other aspects. So the global, like Brazil is not the same as Zimbabwe, put it that way, right? Right. So I'm just thinking about whether, if you could unpack the notion of the global south a little bit more. Like, would this be representative of what's going on in other parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first step was to try to divide, to split a little bit the location aspect of the current literature. Most of the publications and articles that I have access to, they were more specific for the global north context. So I know that the global south is really diverse and have different countries with different economic situations and social situations as well. But I would say this is the first step to have a closer approach of the global south. But of course, I would suggest for future research and for my research as well, to be more specific and to try to assess better the economic and social aspects of the country that research is being conducted in order to really we can have this notion of, okay, we have a research that is about the global south, but it has this specific context of Brazil, and Brazil is a developing country, and we can't generalize the concepts and aspects of Brazil to other realities and countries of the global south. But yeah, I would say there was a try-off to to have a first separation, because what I could see in the literature is that sometimes we treat the word as a one, and we have specificities, and I try to draw some of these specificities. Yep.
So maybe some of that should be in the thesis a little bit, right? So giving some sort of explanatory power to the fact that the sort of the literature dynamic is very, very skewed towards the global north, and that the databases that you're using for the literature, like you said, you acknowledged the fact that there's a lot of literature that these databases do not touch on, right? That might give you a more accurate picture of the way creative hubs actually work, right? So I think maybe there's a piece of a critique there that could be potentially developed, right? Around information dissemination and power, really, on a certain level. Okay, so I have a second question, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, in the paper that you delivered, there was a lot of it felt like there was a lot of conflating. So there was a lot of similar attitude between co-working spaces and creative hubs. Now, you even point out in the paper that creative hubs it's a pretty nebulous concept, right? It's kind of it could be it's not a one size fits all. There are different variations in all sorts of different places. They look different, they organize different, right? So I guess the question here is, how can we, and this is a question for anybody that's doing research on creative hubs, how do we become more specific to think about the management of creative hubs versus co-working spaces? Because I think co-working spaces present a more formal dynamic that are potentially more profit-driven, right? And then you've got creative hubs that don't necessarily fit that model. So maybe by trying to differentiate between the two models, because of course there's a bit of co-working in creative hubs, I just wonder if you think they're the same thing or if you think that they're different, and if that's something that you could articulate.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Karek. And from my understanding, I think they are different concepts, and I would say the main aspect that can differentiate creative hub from co-working is the intermediation and the different objectives. It seems that the co-working has the community aspect, but some of them, they have the profit aspect as well. Then I understand they are different, but for the research execution to have the creative hub alongside with the co-working concept and execution was a way to get more information, more data, more literature, so we can explore the different concepts and the different to really have this knowledge foundation to execute the interviews and to execute the results. But I understand they are different. I couldn't say we have a clear definition of how they are different from each other. And I would say I know this is something that I could get more clear in the research, but I couldn't find ways to get it more clear. I couldn't find it in the literature. I couldn't find it in the empirical data I was working with.
No, that's a fair answer, because it's difficult to do that, right? And that's why what you said about relying too much on the academic journal articles that don't necessarily speak to some of the work that's being done, like even looking at reports, sort of local government reports, let's say out of the UK or whatever, they speak about some of the things that you touch on. So it'd kind of be it'd be a shame, and there's a lot of literature there, so it'd be a shame not to, to at least acknowledge that limitation a little bit more, right? And it gives you a better starting point with respect to differentiating between co-working spaces and what a creative hub is. I guess and this leads to the third question, which is about one way of actually answering this question is saying, well, look, co-working spaces are open to small businesses and freelancers from across the economy, right? creative hubs seem to be a lot more focused on the creative industries and the creative economy.
Yeah.
Right. So starting from that level, that okay, we've got creative economy businesses out there. They're the ones that are at the best of times very precarious. That's why these hubs exist, to provide them with the support to anchor them so that they can actually meet each other and speak and talk and collaborate and do all those different things. Right. So, and in order to do that, right, there's a lot more management that's needed in a creative hub than there is in a co-working space. Right. So you have to be a lot more hands-on in a creative hub than you do, especially when it comes to funding. Right. So already I can see a whole different trajectory of research coming out of that. Right. So the difference in managing, this new economy of small businesses and freelancers and informal workers and all sorts of different aspects. If that makes sense. Sorry, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the methods that you used are totally sound. Okay, so you had 13 creative hubs / co-working spaces. You did interviews with the founders and the CEOs, which is great. I think the analysis was good. But it's interesting because when I saw the paper, there's so many things there that were just very interesting, right? Like the sponsorship model, right? And this can link to the whole idea of the Brazilian, because I guess what you're saying here is there's a Brazilian context that's very specific here, right? What you're kind of delivering here is, and there's a Brazilian model of creative hubs / co-working spaces, and their funding models and their business models are different, right? So I wonder if there's a little bit more that could be said about the business models of the hubs themselves, right? They've got sponsorship, that's fine, but what about the day-to-day? Like, what's their business model like? Which I think is a really important aspect of management.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll stop. I'll pass over to Miko.
Okay, thank you, Tarek. Nico, would you like to?
Yeah, I think what you, Tarek, just did, you many of the things that I was going to sort of inquire on were there, but maybe some just basically. Well, first of all, in my opinion, you have done a really interesting piece of work that is very valuable in terms of a contribution to this area, and it's I think in many ways it's an exceptional master's thesis. One has seen PhDs which don't necessarily in all aspects get to the same level, and in fact, if you think of this as this could almost, like, in terms of its richness, in terms of the things that are addressed in the piece of work, could almost like be a preliminary phase for a PhD. That's good and that's bad. Now, why I'm saying that is because on one hand, what you have is you've sketched out very well, I think, the background. I really enjoyed the literature review. As Tarek noted, your methods are very sound overall. There's not much to comment on them. They hang together very well. But when you then go into your findings, results, and your discussion and your things, it starts to get a little bit messy. And why is it getting a little bit messy? Because I think that you're addressing more things at the end of your thesis than you set out to address in the beginning. And I'll go back to your research questions here. Your research questions, your first research question is, what are the main difficulties experienced by creative hub management? Okay. And I think in many ways you do answer that question. And I note that you are specifically talking about the global South here, and you're positioning your study there. And I think what Tarek raised was about the special nature of the global South. Actually, the sponsor model seems to address that an awful lot. a couple of weeks ago, we were in Mexico, and we noticed that the same sponsor model exists there, because in Guadalajara, they have many similar things there. And I had not realized that there is a sponsor model until I was again reading your thesis on preparation of coming here. So I think that's a really interesting contribution. But I also think that in terms of the choice of your sort of cases there, so you have 13, and then you have, I think you have hubs that are in Ciudad de Tiradentes, which by its very nature of being on the east zone of Sao Paulo, which is the least sort of well-to-do part of the town, and which is full of very early stage entrepreneurs there. There is a maker space there that people is there, and then they do things there, or where it was. I don't know if there's one any longer. But you look at the types of entrepreneurs that were they are very, very, very early stage. They are subsistence entrepreneurs. So, and then you are talking to some hubs which have been essentially set up by multinational corporations or sponsored by them inside the city. And the problem that I have is how do you compare these together, because the principles are quite different. And I think that you very much do address the global south in a very low level development, where you look at Ciudad Tiradentes, and then when you look at some of the more sophisticated hubs, you have people with master's degrees, doing the startup world, which is using the same language as you have in Silicon Valley, using the same tools and so forth. So I think that this is not necessarily a criticism as such. Well, partly it is, but I think that this is not something that you have been. I think the how do you say, the imbalance between your hubs doesn't come out very strongly in your thesis. You do explain who they are, and you have a nice chart for them, and so forth. But I think it would probably warrant a little bit more of attention there, to simply say, well, I'm not asking you that to do it here, but if you're going to basically be using this data somewhere else, I think you might even need to distinguish quite carefully on the nature of these creative spaces and so on and so forth. So I was actually following up a little bit on what Tarek said. I was kind of wanting to ask your personal opinion on how many actually of these, what you call creative hubs, are actually creative hubs. Okay. Do you have an answer for that? Because I think there's all that dichotomy of where is the creativity and how does it sit in here? And I know it's a bit of a wicked question, but any views on that?
Yeah, I would say 5 of them. Yeah, I would consider as a creative hub. So they are more focused on the creative people working there, in creative work that's been developed there. Yeah. And the other spaces that are part of the research, they would recognize themselves as co-workings or as innovation hubs, so they would use different definitions of that. I'd say 5 of them. But this is questionable,
Yeah. I'd just like to sort of raise the issue a little bit on the hubs. Going back to the Ciudad de Tiradentes. Yep. There's been innovation literature written on innovation in emerging economies or developing countries, which I following what Tarek was saying, I don't think Sao Paulo is necessary. However, as in all big cities, you have pockets in every single society. Like in the UK, you have pockets of the third world or developing country or emerging economy within it. So it's always a mix of these things. Like, you cannot say that we have progressed from agricultural economy to knowledge economy, because every country has an agricultural economy, every country has an industrial, so you're just creating new layers on top of existing ones, and the balance is different. So I think that you probably have, in the Ciudad de Tiradentes, you have a different notion of what innovation is about.
Yeah.
And I remember the text on innovation on some author. I fail to remember the name now, but his definition of innovation in emerging economies in much poorer situation than Sao Paulo was that it was everything that the researcher didn't expect. So and this is where again bringing back the distinguishing different features. So what could be extremely creative from the entrepreneur's perspective in Cidade Tiradentes or East Zone of Sao Paulo may be completely trivial in another one. So again, if you take it, it depends on the perspective. Now you've chosen the host perspective, and it would be interesting to understand maybe for future work whether the tools used by the hosts are very different depending on the socioeconomic situation, and I suspect they would be. And I suspect they would also be very much dependent on the sort of the abilities and capabilities of the person, some of the persons involved, of the entrepreneurs or the participants. So the question is how many of these hubs are creative and defining creativity? How? So that's a question. And then the different issues there. So in your first research question, you do answer it, but you don't really consider, I think, the creativity aspect perhaps, and the imbalances of the creativity. And you don't necessarily have a global South perspective, which I rebuilding a little bit what Tarek says.
Tarek just reached.
Yeah, go ahead, Tarek. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to echo Miko a little bit, but I also wanted to say, Ely, that maybe this is an opportunity to I think one of the issues has been, and this is not just you, this is a lot of people that get into this issue, is trying to make sense of something that's very messy.
Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the interesting things that you're beginning to uncover here, and what Miko and I are saying, is to not be afraid of that messiness. And maybe that messiness is what you need to start to articulate a little bit more to give it that the specifically, potentially the LATAM or Latin American context around what you're talking about here, And also it's an opportunity to say, look, the idea of the creative hub is a very Western idea, right? It came from, it's very British actually, came from England, right? So it doesn't fit nicely into all sorts of different cultural contexts, right? And so there's another critique to be made about, how the concept itself is problematic, So not to be afraid of the messiness and say that this messiness is actually what the, I don't know if I would say even Global South. I would say, potentially Brazilian, and even maybe it's a Paulista thing as well. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's a big urban area in that is basically at the same time a first world place and an emerging economy place,
Absolutely.
That was a very good comment, Tarek, and maybe echoing that still a little bit in the sense that if you're going to be writing about this in the future, as I understood you were, then I think you should embrace that messiness as part of the problem setting of the paper. Because you could simply say that the current models don't quite explain how things are. And creativity is the concept of creativity and creative industries is in itself different. So people who are at the level of their subsistence are extremely creative. Are they innovative? Do their inventions diffuse widely? Probably not.
Yep.
So, but they are extremely creative. So maybe the use of the terminology that would also have to be thought of when you write further texts. But this is the interesting part, I think, in many different ways. So I think Tarek's recommendation of not being afraid of the messiness is probably a really good idea. You work in the Brazilian industry, and you know how difficult it is sometimes to operate in Brazil. Brazil is not a beginners like this. It is very complex.
It is.
What's interesting also, another interesting thing that's come up is, so the sponsorship, so the different models that you've outlined, right, that are really interesting, that can potentially be tied to to potentially the Brazilian context, I'm seeing those models show up in the UK now as well, right? So as the UK, as a country, starts to do this, because it's basically doing this right now. So it's a bit of a sinking ship. It's interesting that, you know, in that context, different models are showing up for people to try and survive in these hubs, in places like Bristol, you know, where I work. So there's something about, you know, a lack of financial structure, right? And this as some sort of, what's the word? Not resistance, but some sort of reaction, you know, the survivability. And I always use the term resilience, but a resilient strategy to keep creativity going, right? And I think that's what might differentiate the hub, the creative hub idea, from the more formal co-working for-profit idea, right? So there's a lot to unpack there, and there's an opportunity here to do something really special, right? And I think you just touch on it, you know?
So maybe you could call these creatives. Maybe you need to put a question mark right after the creative question mark hubs. Just as a, you know, because it will depend on where you are and what you do, and you know, what is your thing. Okay, maybe a little bit. My topic number 2 is related to your research question number 2, because you say, how may managers assess and evaluate the hub's performance? And I think, again, you go into it and you look at the different assessments that are there, and in some ways, this is where the structure of the latter part of your thesis would probably benefit from a little bit of clarity, because I think this is my opinion, and it's not so, and I think all the substance is inside there, but I think you might have benefited from basically putting all of your findings into the section previous to the discussion. It may well be that this is just my manner of thinking about it, but I think that bringing, because you brought new sort of quotes from informants right into the last section of your study. So I think you might have benefited on rethinking a little bit the structure, because those additional quotes, they look a little bit like an afterthought, and they might have been. That's fine. Because you did your initial study, and then you enlarged it a little bit more. So structuring the study and thinking about how you present it in a paper where all your interviews and all your findings, you might have them in several stages, will come before the discussion, might be very useful. And not so much bringing the quotes from the informants, except in very special cases, into the discussion and conclusions. And this, I think, is, if we look at the managerial implications, you don't really, you could, and especially when you're looking at writing this later on, you could think about the managerial implications, because you are specifically wanting to understand what the impact is on the hosts. That's your focus. So then all of these things that you're thinking about are actually managerial implications for your host. So you could call that managerial, because then you could collect them together into your conclusions, or perhaps the last part of discussion, depending where you would like to do that. So calling them managerial implications and bringing them all together into one place, especially when you work further and write your papers, is probably a really good idea. So, and here again, you've kind of, here you've a little bit forgotten the global South perspective, I think, because you are the assessment and the evaluation of hub performance tends to be very Western conventional, and you might have a very different sort of perspective of that when you're looking at, say, Ciudad de Tiradentes, which is the east south hub. So again, I think it probably requires some kind of a qualifier on that. The last question, a little bit that I have is I think that your research question number 3, to what extent may internal and external elements such as COVID-19 modify the hub dynamics? I think that question, in a way, you do talk about COVID-19 and you do talk about the impact, but I think that question is not relevant. Because as much as putting it into the key masters, what you should do is, what you should maybe have thought about in your research question number 3, and again you need to think about it when you write the papers, is what are the sort of the implications to the structure? Because you touch on the structure, you talk about the creative hub relationship model. Now, that is not an answer to any one of your research questions, really. I think it's an additional one, or perhaps it's managerial implications, because that doesn't address the difficulties. It doesn't really, address the assessment, and it doesn't really, address the impact of the COVID. It's super interesting, your relationship macro model. But it's almost like an exploration of, okay, how do these models play out? But it's not related to really in any one of your research questions fully. So, and this is why I'm saying that this is where the almost PhD starts to come in, because you ask 3 questions and you could have just answered those 3 and it would have been a perfectly good master's thesis. But then you start to introduce your creative relationship macro models as an additional thing, and you never asked for that. and then you still talk about the taxonomy A, B, C, D, E, and you never really asked for that either. and what I'm saying is they're almost like openings into completely new sort of research tracks and areas, and I think they're really interesting. But they are not part of your original, what you originally set out to do. So they are almost like superstructures on top of your 3 initial research questions. And that's why I'm saying that I think that your research question 3 would have probably need to be phrased in a way where you are exploring the implications and further models and things like that. Because you have the described question, which is request question number 1. What are the main difficulties? You describe the main difficulties. You explain how may managers assess and evaluate. You do that. But then you kind of go, you say it doesn't explore the what if, the bigger thing that you could be thinking about. And you bring those things up, but they're like glued on to the thesis in a way as interesting afterthoughts. That's how it reads. Now, I don't know, what do you think about this commentary? Does it make any sense to you from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, thank you for the questions and comments, Mikko. I understand it's hard to answer the question with the model alone, but I would say the model has helped to, has helped to come to some answers, So I would say the model is the way to get some of the answers of the question. But I agree with the comments. I would say they open some paths for other thoughts, other contributions that can be made. But and they are not related directly to the question. So I agree. Thank you.
I mean, you could, for example, the relationship macro model, you could almost like bring that into your findings area as the basic model, and then the insights that you have, the 4 very nice insights that you have, that you could bring in the discussion. So you can find places for these sort of things, and it's all, or you could if you wanted to. I'm not suggesting you go for that, but there would be logical places in it. And also the kind of taxonomy A, B, C, D, E, it is like again that's almost like a structural thing that whether that is then in your findings or whether that is and what you should be saying around that is that you have found new models of taxonomy that weren't existing before. So you could have the model without the support mechanisms, which is a model from literature. And then you talk that up in your discussion, say, "Oh, we found a new issue there, which is a sponsorship model." And then both the insights from your relationship macro model and the new taxonomies, they are contributions to literature, and they should be in your discussion. But maybe the initial relationship model could be your literature review presented there, or maybe your relationship macro model could be in there. Now, my last comment before I shut up, I talk too much, is I think the relationship macro model actually relates more to the management part of the hosting part of it in a way, because you talk about the relationships. And my only question would be that is not the, now this is just visuals, is not the management actually within the creative hub?
Yeah,
I think that you have probably discussed this. And I recognize that there's maybe an onion type of a structure instead of having the bubbles all around. So I don't know what fits in with it. There could be other ways to model this, where what you have is when you have your, say, sponsorship model, the sponsorship and the host model are overlap in some ways, and they form the critical piece that drives the model. So we're simply rethinking a little bit the modeling of this one. You could actually have a really interesting paper only on this, where you do your literature a little bit, and then you present the current conceptual model where you have these elements, and then you're saying, well, actually there are sponsorship models that we have found in when we're looking at them, and then so on and so forth. So that could be one nice paper, and then you could have another paper talking about the other things, sort of the differences between the east zone and the west zone within the same town, that you have two different worlds happening at the same time. And the implications of defining creative hubs. So at least those papers came to my mind when I was looking at this. So you can have those spin-offs and probably many more. Good. I think that's enough from my side. I think this is really interesting work, really valuable work, and it's well done. So you should be congratulated over it. Thank you very much.
Any comments or questions?
No, actually, yes. I have some comments. I want to thank Miko and Tarek again, because such really great comments and useful that I couldn't disagree with the comments. I think they made a lot of sense. Sorry, and thank you very much for present some contributions. Yeah.
I just have a couple of comments here. One is regarding the structure. I totally agree with Miko. What happens that the text reflects how it was, how things have actually happened. So Ely came up with this relationship model later and I thought, I have discussed with him, well, how could we just merge that into the text itself? But then we end up deciding that we should at least discuss about the host itself and then present the model. But I agree, we could have presented differently, and that would make it more, let's say, easy to read. But I think that the model itself is something that we can explore in a paper. So I also agree, and I have discussed with Ely that the host should be inside the group. It wasn't in the, but I couldn't convince him to because he said, no, this is something that I want to highlight. So one comment about, especially for Tarek, is that creative economy has not survived as a public policy here in Brazil. So I just found I was talking, for instance, to the Economic Development Secretariat, and they actually don't know nothing about creative economy anymore. So this creative hub concept and the creative businesses, this is something that here in, I don't know if I can say in Brazil, but especially in São Paulo state, it kind of has vanished from the public policy perspective. So this is something that's different, very different, I think, from the UK. So this idea of the creative economy and how it's important to sustain it and how it's valuable, it kind of have lost its place. It's still somehow in the city perspective, because, for instance, the three hubs that AD has studied, especially those in the periphery, they are sponsored by the city, and they're still there. So I think if we go back to talk to the manager of this initiative, there are some kind of creative economy perspective there. But for instance, 5 years ago, there was a concern at the state level for how to promote creative economy, how to do that, and there's the only thing inside the Economic Development Secretariat is the cluster policy. And there are clusters that are related to creative businesses. But part of that, just that there are no concern or there are no focus on the creative economy, at least at the state level. So this is something that we have to, this is different. I don't know if how much its creative economy is UK concept and a UK policy and how much is a European concept. But at least here in São Paulo, it's not a kind of a focus anymore.
Can I have a comment on that one? Because I was actually following this very closely. About 5 years ago or 6 years ago in the East, so we were studying Rosana.
Yes.
We wrote a paper around the early stage entrepreneurs in the south in the East. So, and we were looking at the ecosystem of support for them, trying to understand what is there, what isn't, and not very much was. And we specifically looked at the Cidade Tiradentes. And at that point in time, we started when the previous administration was there, and they had a very strong focus on the creative economy. And at that point in time, the Brazilian creative economy was considered to include also gastronomia or gastronomy and other things like that. But then when who was the media guy who became the mayor of Sao Paulo around 5 years ago? Doria, yeah. Doria, and I was actually there when Doria was changed it from creative industries to supporting entrepreneurship overall. So they went from having maker spaces and supporting the creative industries, art classes, things like that. They went into essentially co-working spaces and entrepreneurship support. So they never linked the two together, which is what happens in the UK or in Europe in many places. So this is why they almost dropped the word creativity or creatives and they put the word entrepreneurship or startup. And their idea was the startup phase. So it was an administrative shift completely, and I think that this is part of the confusion also in terms of your the terms used in your master's thesis is because you do talk about creative hubs, and some of them originally were called creative hubs, but now they are early stage entrepreneurial or co-working spaces or whatnot, So it is that's also an interesting part of the history, because you took a while to do your master's thesis, so you saw that phase in a way come true.
Yeah.
I think that partly explains it. So if you're going to write about it in your papers going out, you should be careful to then maybe generalize and maybe describe this kind of a sudden shift in the administration. What does it actually do to the hosting effects?
Yep.
Because what they did in the public hubs is they kicked out all the other managers from that were the part of the previous administration, put new people in that had no history whatsoever in the subprefeitura or in the borough, and they had no connection with the people who were working there. So they rebooted, starting from zero again in for all due terms. And that is really confusing. If you have that table, and there's what you don't do is you don't start from scratch. You give continuity. So maybe this is also some of the things that you might want to write in your paper, is that part of the messiness is the political risk, which is related to this, or the political, the changes of administration principally.
Yeah. I think we have data regarding part of this problem, because we have some interviews with the agency from the government that takes care of the different hubs. Exactly. Yes.
But it also goes back to the leadership of other Sampa.
Yeah.
And which then when that also fully changed their conceptions of what is included in that kind of support, changed completely.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very complex. The USP Leicester people, the East USP people, they know this system really well because they've lived in that presence. And they were supporting many of the early stage entrepreneurial creative economy ventures from there. And we were supporting them in terms of a sort of a small incubator there. And then that kind of fell through also because of the administration change. So you don't have a lot of continuity, which is a really big problem.
Yep.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, taking all of this into consideration, it's a really important aspect, is the political aspect of this. But then something I've noticed in the paper, Ely, you don't really talk about creative economy and creative industries that much, right?
Yeah.
So actually, maybe the idea of Creative Hub is just basically it's obfuscating. It's taking you away from the focus of the work.
Yeah.
So maybe if you scaled it back. So I'm just thinking, just being mindful of the amount of work that you might have to do. Scale it back to collaborative workspaces where you can combine the idea of these co-working spaces and creative hubs and innovation hubs, and you name it. And as Miko says, entrepreneurship is the catch-all phrase right now in political circles. Speak to that, right? That way you remove the creative economy and the creative industries aspect altogether, and it doesn't become something that's artificially shoehorned in to what you're actually trying to say. So what you're talking about is collaborative workspaces, right? And that encompasses everything, right? And so you can be a little bit more. It'll give you less work to do. Put it that way. So.
Yep.
And you could even take it up to the level of calling them intermediaries, because that's what they are. All these hubs are intermediaries, and that's what we've gravitated towards, the word intermediary, which is a little bit more vague, but it does encompass lots of different things inside it. So,
anyway, it's this is something that's just a brief comment about what Nico said. It's very interesting because this creative initiative and entrepreneurship initiative that was added after that, they're so distinct that there are two rooms in the same building. One is for the creative, for the makerspace, and the other is for the and they couldn't merge that. even physically, because the concepts were so different that physically they're in different rooms.
Interesting.
The other point that's interesting is that here in Brazil, entrepreneurship itself has also lost its momentum. Just because we have such a high interesting rate that it has been preventing the development of new startups. Just because it's very, very hard to get funding. Because the interesting rates, they're starting to drop now, but still, so it kind of has lost. So we are in a very, very odd scenario now. Actually, I don't know, but you were right, and well, I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Maybe a comment, maybe this is the reason why the sponsorship model or the sponsor hubs are becoming more and more. Because you have large anchor companies who sponsor these hubs as part of their methodology. They have two reasons. One is the philanthropical one, which is that they give back to society where they came from. But mostly they are looking for talented people to recruit. And thirdly, it's an extension of their research and development activity. So while they may seem very altruistic, there are very solid business motives to be a sponsor. And it's about recruitment. It's about finding using the companies as R&D bases that you can then actually buy out if you want to. So it gives you a first call option for obtaining that kind of a thing. So the whole idea is to have a proximity with the people who are developing stuff, and that's a big competitive advantage for large organizations.
Now, I would add the reputation aspect as well.
Oh, reputation is part of that philanthropy goodwill.
That would capture some of this in the interviews. We're doing it because of the reputation.
What all of this does, Ely, is it starts to push the conversation around these types of spaces further, right? And so now you're engaging with the contemporary, you're engaging with the current situation, which I think is so much more exciting than looking at journal articles from 2016 that basically are no longer relevant, you know? So I think, are kind of relevant, you know? So, and I'm talking about even my work. You know, the pandemic changed a lot of different things, right? So, yeah, so I think, you're in an interesting space right now. I think there's a lot that you could do with this, personally.
Okay, so if anyone does not have anything to add, can we just finish this session, this part of the session? So I will ask Ely to leave us here.